I'm afraid we have to stop at this point. I would like to thank both the speakers for introducing us to the experiences of two different societies dealing with disadvantage which has been historically imposed and enforced as a matter of birth on populations, and exploring the possibility of an education that can come to grips with that disadvantage and perhaps hold up the possibility of justice. Now, the fact that this continues to be an ongoing and unfinished conversation, and perhaps necessarily so, tells us educators both the promise and limitations of education as a social institution and a pedagogic possibility in helping us envision a future, a normative ideal, in bringing about a normative ideal of citizenship, self-transformation, and self-respect. Thank you.
We break for tea now. We should be back in this we should be back in about 15 minutes. But please note that the session on education and social justice will continue in this auditorium, whereas the session on teachers and training will take place in the hall adjacent to this one. Yeah. So it's 11:45 now. Hope we can 11:43 now. Hope we can be back here by say 11:55 or so. Yeah. Thanks. Krasimir Stoyanov's Educational Inequalities and Educational Justice. Professor Stoyanov is the Chair of Philosophy of Education and Educational Theory at Catholic University of Eichstätt, Ingolstadt, Germany. And this session would be chaired by Professor Gopal Guru, Jain, Jawaharlal Nehru University, Delhi. May I request from? Yeah. Professor Krasimir, can we have you here on the stage? Yeah. No. So I shall read Professor Neera Chandhoke's paper titled Social Justice, Obligation and Toleration in Plural Societies. It's clear. Introduction. Social justice is a relational concept that focuses on what we owe others who are proximate as well as distant. Central to social justice is therefore a theory of obligation. But even if we appreciate that we owe others, the question why we owe others remains unnegotiated. I draw upon Gandhi's philosophy to figure out the answer to this question. Gandhi also helps us to discover what toleration means, or why we should tolerate other ways of being and beliefs in plural society. Both the arguments made by Gandhi are essential to negotiate the problems of Indian society, which is plural but also deeply divided. Section number 1, Social Pluralism. Let me begin the argument in this essay by laying out a dilemma, which is arguably central to most plural societies. It is by now commonplace that Indian society contains within its spatial, political, and symbolic boundaries a number of communities that subscribe to diverse conceptions of the good. This diversity might well be thin, that is, confined to lifestyles and preferences. Some people eat meat and others are vegetarians. Some people are devoted to the pursuit of classical music, others to jazz, and still others to fusion music, while some are still others to fusion music. Some persons plot their day according to astrological predictions, and others are rank disbelievers. And some people are teetotalers, and others believe that a bucolic existence is preferable to a life without alcohol. These differences can be termed thin, not because they do not matter for their adherents, but because, given the right environment and convincing arguments, people can be persuaded to change their attitudes. A meat eater can, at least in theory, be won over to vegetarianism by a well-reasoned and empirically substantiated argument that not eating meat is a healthier way to live. Equally, an alcoholic can be persuaded that a persistently bucolic existence is dangerous for health. The common adjudicator of different points of view in this instance is health. We may therefore discover some meeting ground in the foreseeable future given convincing arguments and some ready capacity for persuasion. Human beings have the right to make choices on the kind of life they want to lead, but they can be persuaded to revise their choices in the light of good arguments and right information. However, when we speak of cultural, religious, or linguistic pluralism, as in the case in India, we refer to thick diversity inasmuch as we indicate that persons subscribe to different belief systems, speak different languages, believe in different gods, and engage in different cultural practices. Belonging to a cultural community or being embedded in distinct systems of meaning is not a matter of choice, though people can certainly move on to learn to appreciate other cultures or even adopt them. Nothing that has been said till now constitutes a departure from the fairly standard description of Indian society that we routinely communicate in our classrooms to students. That so many religions took birth in India, Indians speak X number of languages, and Indians worship Y number of gods, and so on. Notably, the proposition that India is a plural society is purely descriptive. This descriptive proposition falls into the category of social pluralism. Social pluralism is a statement about how things are in a specific society and not a statement about how things should be in the said society. This variant of pluralism simply does not carry any kind of normative connotations. For instance, groups in a society may keep to themselves and regard other groups as the unknown and perhaps the unknowable. We, members of Z group, can believe, have our own reasons for doing things that we want to, and members of group N have their own reasons for doing things that they want to. These reasons have to do with our internal self-understandings, our shared language, traditions, and histories. These internal understandings can neither be comprehended nor appreciated by people who have not been born into a culture or shaped by the values of the culture and by narratives of belonging. In sum, individuals belonging to a distinct cultural community can approach individuals belonging to other such groups in different ways, and none of these may be of normative significance. We see the problem. A mere description of how things are in a complex society does not rule out the ranking of divergent conceptions on criteria laid down by dominant conceptions of the good. Nor does the proposition prohibit the collapse of different notions of the good into some dominant conception. Recollect how often we hear from the religious right that Hinduism is all-inclusive and that it can absorb into its fold different religious persuasions. What this does to the sentiments of people expected to merge into another religion goes completely unremarked. In short, when we say that India is socially a plural society, this tells us nothing about how different conceptions of the good stand in relation to each other, how members of different communities relate to each other, and more important, what we owe others who speak a different language or worship different gods. Let me put the point across bluntly. The term social pluralism simply does not indicate that murderous riots between religious communities violate the basic precept of democratic justice, that each citizen is entitled to an equal share of the benefits and burdens of our society. As educators, we describe but fail to indicate to our students what we owe our fellow citizens, even if they belong to a different religious community. We lapse on the issue of social justice. Social justice is a relational concept insofar as it indicates what people are owed in a democratic society. What people are owed in a democratic society is clear equality of opportunity, equality of life chances, equality of voice, and equality of status. According to the principle of social justice, we owe each other, if nothing else, equal respect. Section 2, forging connections. There is nothing in the purely empirical and descriptive proposition that most societies are plural that allows us to transit to or be committed to the normative proposition that each of these ways of life are of equal value and that they should neither be ranked nor reduced to a common value. Or, from the purely empirical fact that most societies are plural, we cannot reason that since different groups go about the business of forming and revising their beliefs in different ways, and since these ways appeal to different kinds of moral considerations, each of these are valid on their own terms. From the fact of plurality, we cannot make an involuntary move to the doctrine of pluralism. Therefore, the first moment in our argument, social pluralism, and the second moment in the argument, normative pluralism, will have to be connected through arguments and persuasion. But before that, a word on pluralism. The concept of pluralism, which emerged in distinct opposition to philosophical monism, disputes the idea that it is possible to privilege only one value system as either the source of all values or as a master value against which other values can be ranked. Specifically, the doctrine of pluralism contains two propositions. Firstly, no one system of values can explain or interpret the world, or assume that it alone is the originator of other values. Second, there is no one unique and true set of moral standards against which we can measure either the validity or the invalidity of other values. The concept, in other words, disavows any kind of grading. Consequently, each conception of the good stands on its own, and each conception of the good is irreducible, or that it cannot and should not be reduced to or dominated by another conception of the good. It follows that though pluralism is a value, it is a value with a difference. Like other normative concepts such as equality or freedom or justice, it captures the desirability of a certain state of affairs. But unlike most other values, pluralism is a precondition for a plurality of values. It is therefore a second order value inasmuch as it tells us that all belief systems are of equal value, or that it acts upon other values in the sense of telling us that equality is as good as freedom, or rights are as valuable as obligations, or that dignity is as good as benevolence. For this reason, the concept of pluralism helps us to reorder an already ordered world. If our democratic world has been politically organized to privilege, say, majoritarianism, pluralism tells us that there are other equally valid ways of thinking about the political project of living together. If our society privileges one language, pluralism informs us that other languages also deserve pride of place. As a second order value, pluralism performs both a pedagogic as well as a political role because it regards all values as of equal significance and teaches us to do so as well. Above all, normative pluralism informs us that a plurality of goods from different linguistic affiliations to different religious persuasions to different languages is valuable for people, irrespective of their own beliefs in these matters. Significantly, in the context of plural societies, the concept of pluralism teaches us that each belief system or the cultural community as a repository of the system, as well as the individual members who are the bearers of these beliefs, have to be given equal respect. The question the theories of social justice should therefore be concerned is, why do we owe others? Next section, why we owe others. In Western liberalism, the notion of owing each other is grounded in concepts of autonomy and rationality. We respect others and we respect their belief systems because these belief systems have been rationally chosen by autonomous human beings. The relationship between human beings is one of exteriority, and this serves to infinitely reproduce the invidious we versus they distinction. On the other hand, Gandhi's concept of obligation is based on a relationship of interiority. 1. For Gandhi, the self encompasses the other. Therefore, those who hurt others assault their own integrity, or that we harm a part of ourselves when we allow harm others because they are ourselves in a different form. If others represent us in a different form, then their welfare is bound up intrinsically with others. There's a quote from Gandhi's writings. I do not believe that any individual may gain spiritually and those that surround him suffer. I believe in Advaita, monism or non-dualism. I believe in the essential unity of man and for that matter all that lives. Therefore, I believe that even if one man gains spiritually, the whole world gains with him, and if one man falls, the whole world falls to that extent. Unquote. Gandhian ethics, writes Thomas Weber, stems not only from the intellectually deductive formulae, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, but on the statement of faith that what in fact you do to others, you also do to yourself. The belief of changing and perfecting the self, a possibility open equally to all, means that for him the choice of an individual is a choice for mankind because the self and mankind are ultimately one. As Douglas Allen puts the point across in this way, quote, in most of his writings on self, Gandhi endorses a dynamic, social, relational view of self in which there is no ethnical or spiritual self without the other, and the other is an integral part of who I am, unquote. Not only is the construction of divisions between human beings or the forging of notions of us and them are highly arbitrary, this construction is completely unnecessary. This becomes clear the moment we realize our dependence on others when we begin to make moral choices in order to realize ourselves. It becomes clear the moment we realize that the relationship between human beings is not one of exteriority but of deep interiority. And it becomes clear when we begin to wonder what harming another person does to our own moral personalities. When Gandhi claimed that an individual's highest duty in life is to serve mankind and take his share in bettering its condition, he added that this could not be done unless one understands and respects the self. 2. Gandhi suggests that we are born into a world that has been creatively fashioned through the mental and the manual labors of not only the members of our own community, but also those of other communities. Notably, the world that shapes our moral personalities is not only our country or our society, but humanity. We would not be what we are without the contributions of other human beings to the making of our world. Therefore, we owe humanity. We owe a debt of gratitude to many people, both seen and unseen, simply because they have contributed to the vitality of our institutions, to the constitution of our social values that inform our choices, and to the satisfaction of our material needs. We, writes Gandhi, quote, are born debtors in the world to which we owe a debt, and we are dependent on others right from birth. Man becomes man only by recognizing his dependence on others, unquote. We owe the living as much as we owe earlier generations for what they have contributed to the best that we have today. These are enormous contributions, and we cannot repay them all, but in repaying what we can, we show we are part of a world that is interdependent over time and space. There is more to what we owe people than mere gratitude. Gandhi writes, quote, so long as man remains selfish and does not care for the happiness of others, he is no better than an animal and perhaps worse. His superiority to the animal is seen only when we find him caring for his family. He is still more human, that is, much higher than the animal, when he extends his concept to the family, to include his country or community as well. He climbs still higher in the scale when he comes to regard the human race as his family. Unquote. Families, communities, nations, and humanity are not exclusive entities. The quote from Gandhi continues. One's respective dharma towards one's self, family, nation, and the world cannot be divided into watertight compartments. The harm done to oneself or one's family cannot bring about the good of the nation. Similarly, one cannot benefit the nation by acting against the world at large. Unquote. Gandhi himself was what he was, a great moral leader and a giver of remedies for the maladies of the human condition, because he drew inspiration from a variety of sources. His philosophy is indebted to four great spiritual and moral traditions: Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism, and Christianity. Gandhian philosophy is constituted as much by the Bhagavad Gita as it is by the Sermon on the Mount. And he drew inspiration as much from Tolstoy and John Ruskin as much as he drew inspiration from Vivekananda and other spiritual leaders in India. Even as he brought these insights together to craft a philosophical framework, Gandhi taught us that our ability to make our own history is located in the threefold intersection of A. Moral reflection, B. The languages given by our community, and C. The languages we learn from other cultural communities and people. In the process, we learn that we owe others respect because they are a part of us and because they have made this world meaningful for us. Next section, pluralism as a constitutive context for toleration. The second contribution of Gandhi to the idea of obligation is toleration. The concept of toleration flows from a certain conception of what we owe others, how we perceive the moral standing of others, and how we organize our own relationship with others. We respect other points of view because we believe that persons have good reasons for committing to certain notions of the good. That they are entitled to these beliefs and that this is valid irrespective of our own approval or disapproval, or sympathy or lack of sympathy for these beliefs. It follows that the concept of toleration makes sense only when we live among people who do not speak, in many ways, quite the same language as we do. As Galeotti reminds us, toleration, quote, is the social virtue and the political principle that allows for the peaceful coexistence of individuals and groups who hold different views and practice different ways of life within the same society. This very general definition indicates that the conditions under which toleration is required are situations in which social differences exist, which do not naturally coexist harmoniously. If they were to do so, there would be no need for such a principle. Unquote. Toleration, therefore, is not a product of social indifference towards others or lack of knowledge about others. In any case, in modern market economies and electoral systems, it is difficult to believe that any group can be so insulated from the multiple transactions of a society that it remains unknown or the unknowable. Where groups compete for economic and political power, and where groups have to connect to forge political coalitions against abuses of power, toleration becomes even more of an essential component of intergroup as well as of interpersonal relations. The moment we come into close touch with people who are not like us, the imperative that we should tolerate their conceptions of the good becomes even more pressing. We practice intolerance in such societies at great risk to our collective futures. Two more features of toleration are of some note. Toleration does not imply passive acceptance of other groups and their belief systems. And toleration does not emerge from the womb of weakness inasmuch as P accepts Q's conception of the good simply because P is not in a position to affect Q. This virtue emerges as a property of strong societies and strong sentiments of personhood. Toleration acquires moral significance when we are in a position to make judgments about the non-desirability of certain practices. And yet, we accept these practices simply because we accept the right of people to engage in these practices. The referral of toleration, it follows, is not inconsequential. That some people like pulp fiction and others abstract philosophy. To be tolerant is to imply that we accept practices and opinions on issues that matter a great deal to us, such as religious beliefs. The proposition that toleration is a virtue or that the concept is a desirable property of human relations still does not allow us to fully answer the question of why we should tolerate other ways of life, other belief systems, and other values. What are the epistemological foundations of toleration? One answer has been offered above, that we tolerate opinions and practices One answer has been offered above, that we tolerate opinions and practices because this flows from a certain conception of what we owe human beings. A more substantive answer to this question is offered by Gandhi, who gave us the epistemological basis of toleration. Gandhi had a complex notion of truth. At one level, truth was God. Therefore, to pursue God is to track the truth. At a deeper level, for Gandhi, truth signifies knowledge, and knowledge is an essential precondition for self-realization. The problem is that even though persons endlessly search for the truth, they cannot possibly grasp this truth, nor can they know what the absolute truth is. Citing the gospel, in which a judge wants to know what the truth is but gets no answer, Gandhi suggested that the question posed by the judge has still not been answered. For the truth as posed by the ancient King Harishchandra, who renounced everything he possessed for the sake of the truth, is not the same as the truth of Hussein, who sacrificed his life for the truth. These two truths are equally true, but they may or may not be our truth. Quote, beyond these limited truths, however, there is one absolute truth which is total and all-embracing, but it is indescribable. Unquote. The philosopher J.N. Mohanty interprets Gandhi's concept of truth as plural, but also unattainable as follows. Though the existence of various philosophical theories of truth shows us that truth holds different meanings, and though these philosophies give us different accounts of the nature of truth, there exists a common pre-philosophical and pre-reflective understanding of truth. This is the explicandum for the philosophers of truth. And to that extent, there is a point of agreement between them. Gandhi, in effect, tells us that the one ultimate truth is manifested in the shape of many truths, but each of these truths is but an incomplete version of the ultimate one. Using the metaphor of the 7 blind men and the elephant, Gandhi suggests that we are as blind as the 7 in the story. Quote, we must therefore be content with believing the truth as it appears to us. Unquote. The unity of persons and understanding the best life as one that moves beyond hatred or necessity, and one that aims at non-violence and morality. The rules of morality that are contained in the world's greatest religions, wrote Gandhi, quote, are largely the same. If morality is destroyed, religion which is built on it comes crashing down. Unquote. If this proposition holds, then all the principal religions are equally valid and deserving of respect. This particular recognition was to define the proposition of equality of all religions, which was the unique Gandhian contribution to the concept of secularism in India. Notably, the implications of Gandhi's insistence that each of us cannot possibly know the truth, and that all that we can know is a partial truth, are far-reaching. If persons have the moral capacity to know the truth, but not the entire truth, then no one person or group can claim superiority over another on the ground that their truth is the ultimate truth, and that other truths are false or travesties of the real thing. Therefore, we realize that just as our partial truth is dear to us, other equally partial truths are bound to be dear to them. There is simply no point in comparing religions, in grading them, or in pronouncing one religion as superior to the other. Quote from Gandhi: "If we had attained the full vision of truth, we would no longer be mere seekers, but become one with God, for truth is God. But being only seekers, we prosecute our quest and are conscious of our imperfection. And if we are imperfect ourselves, religions as conceived by us must also be imperfect and is subject to a process of evolution and reinterpretation. And if all faiths outlined by men are imperfect, the question of comparative merit does not arise." Gandhi's notion of the truth gives us, in sum, not only a strong reason why we should practice toleration, but also a theory of nonviolence. The nature of Gandhi's truth, in other words, preempts the use of violence, because violence for Gandhi symbolizes arrogance, the conviction that since we know better than others what the truth is, our view should be given precedence over others, or that other truths should be graded according to our truth, admits of no other version of the truth but ours. This leads to intolerance, hatred, and violence. For the moment we seek to impose our truth upon others, we do violence to their truths. But if human beings are not capable of knowing the absolute truth, they simply do not have the competence to punish other people through violent words, deeds, or even thoughts. In other words, Gandhi tells us that we learn toleration the moment we comprehend that none of us is capable of grasping the complete truth, which for him signified both knowledge and self-realization. We can only struggle to attain the truth, because this is the way we realize our moral beings. It is of some interest to note that Gandhi's theory of knowledge provided the conceptual basis for his theory of toleration, in the same way as John Locke's theory of knowledge inexorably led to his theory of toleration. The parallel is not surprising when we recollect that Gandhi's theory of knowledge was fashioned in a context that was roughly parallel to the one in which John Locke wrote his famous essay on toleration, that of immense religious strife. Bhikkhu Parekh suggests that Gandhi's notion of nonviolence is conceptually located in a novel epistemological argument that violence rests on false epistemological foundations. But before Gandhi, Locke had arrived at the same conclusion through different modes of reasoning. We do not know whether Gandhi read Locke's essay on toleration, though he was perfectly familiar with all variants of Western thought: liberal, romantic, anarchic, and anti-modern. But there are certainly strong overlaps between the two theories, perhaps because the political contexts of these theories were similar. Notably, many of the enduring and authoritative arguments for toleration in 17th century Europe arose in the middle of religious strife. The adoption of one religion as a state religion, suppression of minority religious groups, and forcible conversions. Conflict over religion engulfed most of the continent in rampant civil war, posed a direct threat to social cohesion and political stability, and embroiled people in mutually assured destruction, to take a phrase from anti-nuclear movement. Locke, through his celebrated argument on toleration, struggled hard to emancipate the state from corrosive wars over religion, as well as just restore civility to the body politic. The essay, which suggested that all beliefs and practices which do not threaten public order should be tolerated, was written in the second half of the 17th century to accomplish precisely this task. Considering that Locke outlined his theory against the background of frenzied religious clashes, Theorists wonder whether his argument, reflecting as it does the ideas of his patron Earl of Shaftesbury, was not a pragmatic political response to an obdurate problem, rather than a consistent moral and principled stand. Was the argument for toleration less an abstract statement of a principle than a moral exercise on persuasion? The wider question that comes up in this context is the following: do we tolerate other beliefs merely to avoid conflict or to add to our own stock of knowledge of value systems? Or do we practice toleration because it is a good in its own right, irrespective of the context? Locke's celebrated letter concerning toleration, written in 1667, and his Epistola de Tolerantia, written in 1869, satisfied both these requirements. Undeniably, all 4 drafts of the essay revealed his concern and his involvement in English politics during the latter part of his career. Fearing that the political society of his day possessed few resources to survive the onslaught of religious wars, and even fewer resources to enable people to... Yeah. Just be done in 5 minutes? Yeah?
We're supposed to close at 12:45.
Sure. Fearing that political society of the day possessed few resources to survive the onslaught of religious wars, and even fewer resources to enable people to live in peace, Locke proceeded to analyze the origins of these political conflict. In the course of his investigations, Locke identified religious strife as a major cause of turmoil. Though Locke analyzed that the origins of discontent could be traced to the merger of the state and the church, official disregard of other religions, and persecution of minorities, he also theorized why people had to be tolerant of other religions. His case for toleration rested on his theory of knowledge. The opinions and actions of human beings are of 3 sorts. A. Opinions and actions which do not concern government and society, and which are purely speculative and relate to divine worship. B. Opinions that are neither good nor bad. These concern society and men's conversations with each other, but are largely indifferent to others. And C, those opinions which concern society, which are also good or bad. When it came to the first sort of opinions, those that held these opinions had a right to their beliefs. In speculations and religious worship, every man hath a perfect, uncontrollable liberty, which he may freely use without or contrary to the magistrate's command, without any guilt or sin at all, provided always that it be all done sincerely and out of conscience to God, according to the best of his knowledge and persuasion. Locke's theory of toleration is grounded on 2 principles. Firstly, some opinions do not have any influence on the actions of others, and therefore they do not fall within the cognizance of the magistrate. Secondly, there is a vital difference, Locke seemed to suggest, between knowledge that flows from the comprehensions of propositions that relate to the experiential and the concrete, and knowledge based upon faith. The former genre of knowledge is verifiable. The latter is not, since it emanates from revelation. Each human being has to, through certain justificatory procedures which involve reasoning, personal convictions, conscience, and relevance, validate his or her faith. For this reason, no one other than the person concerned can ever understand why people believe the way they do. Gandhi's theory of toleration and proscription of violence, on the other hand, is based on Gandhi's theory of toleration and proscription of violence is based on roughly the same context, that of violence between religious communities, which had become the norm in India during the second decade of the 20th century. Gandhi wished to negate this violence for 3 reasons, of which one reason was pragmatic and the other 2 embedded in his philosophy. 1. Conflict between religious communities made the task of forging a mass movement impossible. A way out of this pointless violence had to be found. This he found in the precept of equality of all religions. Secondly, the employment of violence in the pursuit of goals dictated by this or that religion went against his deeply held conviction that no religion can ever provide a reason for or legitimate violence. Thirdly, the partial nature of our knowledge of truth prescribes violence. It is only when one agent believes that his or her truth is a final truth and that other truths are false that she practices violence. The conviction that we possess the truth and others do not leads to arrogance, intolerance, and violence. The last paragraph. But the moment we realize that all of us can know, but the moment we realize that all of us can know but the partial truth, we learn to respect others as well as modify our own pretensions. This recognition curbs those instincts that impel a person to intolerance and helps cultivate finer virtues, that of accepting other convictions and beliefs as worthy of respect. Otherwise, animosity, hate, distrust, violence become the defining features of a body politic. We ourselves become embroiled in the politics of suspicion. Therefore, toleration is the best way of preventing ourselves from sliding into religious bigotry, racism, chauvinism, discrimination, and communalism. Thank you. The paper ends. Please remember this paper was sent and Professor Neera Chandhoke is not here to take questions.